families, creating a lifetime of memories. Sadly, some families are denied these important moments due to the sad practice of alienation. These are families divided.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Families Divided TV. In this episode, Jeffery Morehouse, who is Executive Director of Bring Abducted Children Home, will be speaking to us. Did you know that every year, nearly 1,000 U.S. children are kidnapped by a parent to a foreign country and cut off from the only life they knew? Since 1994, in Japan alone, more than 475 children have been kidnapped. For Jeffery, the last time that he saw his only child, his son, and last time he heard his voice was Father's Day 2010, when he dropped him off at his mother's for a visit. This is really a heart-wrenching episode and really things that we really need to know more about. So please stay tuned and pay close attention. It's so important. We're also going to hear from one of our presenters for our upcoming fall conference in October, Dr. Noel Hunter, who is the president of I Stand Parent Network, who also works with abducted children all over the world, will be presenting at our fall conference titled Alienation: The Truth Regarding the Trauma and Abuse. She's going to be sharing with you some of the things that she'll be discussing with us at that fall conference. She does an incredible work. So I really hope you'll be able to join us. Many have already registered, and now we are continuing in our registration, and I hope you'll be able to join us. We're going to be back with Jeffery Morehouse right after these messages.
Hello, I'm Dr. Noel Hunter. I am President Emeritus and co-founder of I Stand Parent Network. I Stand is a voluntary nonprofit that empowers parents to return their children from international parental child abduction, or IPCA. We also help parents and families prevent their children from being separated and removed from their homes to another nation through prevention and education. And importantly, we empower survivors, both youth survivors, children who are formerly abducted and have come home from IPCA, and their parents. And so I'm just pleased, very pleased to be participating in this international conference, Alienation: The Truth Regarding the Trauma and Abuse. And I'll be discussing the particular intersections between parental alienation and international parental child abduction. The title of my session is Parental Alienation and International Child Abduction: Survivor Stories. And I'll be relaying the experiences of both parents and youth survivors who have experienced international parental child abduction and parental alienation. I'll first relate the experiences of parents who have successfully returned their children home from IPCA and yet have profound memories, experiences, scars, and opportunities now to heal from the trauma of seeking the return of their children and being on the receiving end of alienating behavior, both by the parent and the child or children. I'll share some of their experiences, their coping mechanisms, and importantly, how they overcame alienation to maintain a relationship with their children and to successfully return them home, and now to have a new relationship in which the trauma and the scars of alienation and abduction remain, but are also supplemented and diminished by new relationships and new loving patterns among them. And then, as importantly, I will share some of the experiences of IPCA youth survivors, children who were abducted to another nation and then returned home. I'll relate some of their experiences and what it was like to, as a matter of survival, have to conform to the alienating and abducting parents' narrative. I'll share their experiences, what it was like to engage in alienating behavior and the conflicting loyalty that they experienced when engaging with their seeking parent. And I'll share their experiences now home and what it's like to rebuild and rekindle a relationship with a parent whom they previously were alienated from. I look forward to joining you for this session, and I thank you. We'll see you soon.
Divorce and co-parenting are a major life interruption for families, especially the kids, but also for parents and grandparents. And it's even worse in blame-filled, high-conflict cases. When parents engage in alienation by turning the kids against the other parent or grandparents, kids suffer. They're denied the opportunity to build the 4 big skills necessary for future resilience. New Ways for Families online class can help. Parents learn to use our popular BIF and EAR skills to calm the conflict and stop the hostile emails and texts. And we even have a class for kids and parents to learn together. Research shows a 75% improvement in joint parental decision-making after this course is taken, plus overall improvements for kids' well-being. Don't wait to make this affordable investment in your children's future and improve your well-being too. Start learning new ways for your family today at conflictplaybook.com.
Every morning I wake up twice. The first time to rush out of bed and get my son ready for school, and I can hear his voice, "Daddy, can I have toast and honey for breakfast?" And then I really wake up. He's still missing. The nightmare continues. My son, Mochi Atomu Imoto Morehouse, was kidnapped to Japan in 2010. I've won lengthy court cases in Japan twice, where the courts ruled that the U.S. custody order had legal effect, and then they refused to provide me any reunification or his location. The last time I saw my only child, the last time I heard his voice, was on Father's Day 2010, when I dropped him off to visit his mother. My name is Jeffery Morehouse, and I'm Executive Director of Bring Abducted Children Home. Bring Abducted Children Home is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the immediate return of internationally abducted children being wrongfully detained in Japan. And we strive to end Japan's human rights violation of denying children unfettered access to both parents. We collaborate with an international alliance of partners working to end child abduction to and within Japan. And we're also founding partners in the Coalition to End International Parental Child Abduction, uniting organizations to work passionately to end international parental kidnapping of children through advocacy and public policy reform. Since 2012, I've organized protests, worked on federal and state legislation, led hundreds of meetings on Capitol Hill, the Department of State, the Department of Justice, U.S. and foreign embassies, and the White House. I've testified and briefed the U.S. Congress 8 times on this crisis, and on October 13 of 2022, I briefed the United Nations Human Rights Council on parental child abduction within and to Japan. In my own case, I was granted primary custody of my son in the state of Washington in 2007. 3 years later, on June 20th, 2010, I dropped my son Mochi off to begin a week-long visit with his mother. He was 6.5 years old. That's where the endless nightmare begins. 6 days later, I received a phone call that no parent ever wants to receive. It was the police. My son and my ex-wife had been reported missing. I knew immediately what had happened. She had succeeded in what she had threatened to do. She had kidnapped our son to Japan. That moment, my life was shattered. My days would become consumed with dealing with local law enforcement, the U.S. Department of State, Japanese consular officials, and anything I could think of doing to find my little boy. I mean, how could this happen to my child? I did everything I could think of to prevent it. There were even passport and travel restraints in the court order to bar her from going outside the state of Washington with him. Well, the problem is restraints are only effective when one chooses to abide. For someone intending to commit kidnapping, restraints have little true power. When the Seattle consulate of Japan denied her passport request, she simply went to the consulate in Portland, which issued her one in violation of the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs passport issuance policy. Despite winning these cases in Japan, which noted that she had no legal right to take our son there, I have not heard from him since Father's Day 2010. And some people have said to me, at least you know he's safe. He's with his mother. He may be somewhere in Japan with her, but he is not safe. He's at risk. She has willingly and intentionally kidnapped him to a foreign land with the intent of alienating him from me and everyone he knows. Imagine being a child and your mother steals you away to a foreign country and then tells you your father doesn't want you anymore or that he's dead. Your whole life is now built on a foundation of lies. This is not what a healthy, nurturing parent does. It's child abuse. The Supreme Court of the United States has recognized that family abduction is a form of child abuse with potentially devastating consequences for a child, which may include negative impacts on the physical and mental well-being of the child and can cause a child to experience a loss of community and stability, leading to loneliness, anger, and fear of abandonment. In 2016, 6 years into his kidnapping, my son was asked by his attorney, "Do you ever think of your father?" He started crying and said, "Sometimes I dream of him at night." According to US government figures, at least 489 children have been kidnapped to Japan since 1994, when the Office of Children's Issues was created at the US Department of State. A State Department official named Japan a top 3 worst offender at a July 16, 2015 congressional hearing. Ambassador Jacobs mentioned Brazil and India in addition to Japan. The crisis doesn't end there. Based on US government figures, nearly 10,000 children were reported abducted by a parent from the United States to another country between 2010 and 2020. That means 26,000 children have been kidnapped to a foreign country since 1994, when the Office of Children's Issues was formed. After years of pressure, they finally released some data acknowledging most of the victims never make it home. So I've talked about the children as victims. You might be saying to yourself, wait a minute, this is a custody dispute, not a crime. Now, there may be components of an unsettled custody matter depending on the circumstances of the case, but states can frequently charge the abductor under custodial interference statutes. Now, you'll have to check with a family law attorney in your state or local law enforcement or the local prosecutor's office. But federally, international parental kidnapping is a crime under 18 U.S.C. 1204. The law states, whoever removes a child from the United States or attempts to do so, or retains a child who has been in the United States, outside of the United States, with the intent to obstruct the lawful exercise of parental rights, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned. You might be thinking, since it's a federal crime, the FBI just goes and arrests the kidnapping parent, rescues the child, justice is served, and the damage to the child is minimized. It's not so easy. Based on the response from the US Department of Justice, less than 2% of the international parental child abduction cases are charged with the crime that occurred. Now, we've encouraged the department to understand, we've engaged the department to understand why so few cases are pursued. We were told this falls under prosecutorial discretion. In other words, they asserted we can't do anything from headquarters in Washington, D.C. Those decisions are made at the 94 federal districts around the country, and they have sole discretion to pursue it or not. In my experience, you get a better response from law enforcement if your home is broken into than if your child is abducted by a parent to a foreign country. I remember in the first week of my son's kidnapping, the detective in the county's child find unit telling me, "What do you expect us to do? He's in Japan." That's when I realized I was going to have to become the CEO of my son's kidnapping case. If they don't know what to do or are not interested in doing it, I'm going to have to learn and provide them the direction that's necessary. So that's what I did. I was fortunate that in the first 24 hours, a parent who had already been experiencing this had contacted me through my attorney and welcomed me, as he put it, to the worst club in the world. Law enforcement should open a case and enter your child into the National Crime Information Center database. If they advise you that it requires a custody order or a criminal charge, point them to federal laws 34 USC 41307, reporting requirements for missing children, and 34 USC 41308, state requirements for reporting missing children. It doesn't require a custody order or criminal charges. 34 USC 41307 states, each federal, state, and local law enforcement agency shall report each case of a missing child under the age of 21 reported to such agency to the National Crime Information Center of the Department of Justice. And 34 USC 41308 ensures that no law enforcement agency within the state establishes or maintains any policy that requires the observance of any waiting period before accepting a missing child or unidentified person report. But they don't always follow that. So you might have to provide them with the legal requirements for them to do it. If you're a parent or a legal guardian of an international parental kidnapped child, you're not alone. You can reach out to us through our website. We can offer guidance from more than a decade of work on this human and family rights crisis. We can put you in touch with other colleagues and their organizations if they're a better fit for you, but you're not alone. If you're in the early stages of an international parental child abduction, realize this may feel like a sprint, but it's actually a marathon. Find ways to pace yourself. Stay as healthy as possible physically and mentally. Continue to pay your bills and look to create a sense of stability as much as you can in your life while coping with the ups and downs and the long moments of waiting for positive action. You're going to need to organize your new job of managing your abduction case. Create a way to keep records of who you talk to, who you email, and what they respond. Sometimes a detail that didn't seem important 6 months ago is useful today. If you haven't already done so, open a case with the Office of Children's Issues at the U.S. Department of State and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Links are on our resource page on our website. At the Department of State, they should provide you a form named Authorization for the Release of Information under the Privacy Act for you to complete. If you're working with an advocate like myself or one of our partner organizations, you may want to include us in Section A so that they can share information and we can help you with your goals with them. On page 2 of the form, I recommend that you check the box to notify individual members of Congress and staff. This allows and requires them to notify your senators and congressional representative. Now, what are your senators and representatives going to do to help you? It creates options and other potential tools to assist you. Each office has what they call constituent services. If you live in their state or their district, you are a constituent. They are there to serve you, to help you. You'll open a case with all three of them. Will they all help you? If you manage to give them something within their ability, they should. Start with something simple and ask them to request an update on your child's case from the Department of State. Show up when they're holding a town hall near you and ask a question. Be respectful, be persistent, build a relationship with them. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children can help function as a liaison with the State Department, the Department of Justice, FBI, and local law enforcement. They have other functions and services they can assist you with too, such as distributing a missing persons poster for your child or children. Depending on which country your child was kidnapped to, will impact the options and strategies that you might want to pursue. In general, the countries are divided between signatories of the Hague Convention on the Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction and non-Hague Abduction Convention countries. The Hague Abduction Convention is an international agreement for how to respond through the civil courts in the country the child was abducted to. And part of this is because not all countries consider it a crime to kidnap your own child. So in order to get countries to agree to this framework, there had to be concessions made. It also does not have a mechanism for holding countries accountable for when they violate the intent of the agreement. You're going to need legal counsel to assist you, at least in the foreign country where your child was taken to. We or our partner organizations can provide some insight from our experience on the challenges with certain countries, but we can't provide legal advice. With a Hague Abduction Convention country, you can file a return application or an access application. The return application is when you would like your child returned to the home country, to the US. An access application is when you would like access to your child, but they're not going to be returned. If the country becomes a Hague signatory after your child is abducted there, you may be limited to only filing a Hague access application. That's what I experienced. So where and how do you file this? The State Department can provide forms through the Office of Children's Issue to you or your attorney to complete and transmit to the foreign government through the US Central Authority. You can also file it directly with the Foreign Central Authority. My recommendation is to do this through the State Department. This creates a record and more accountability. If you file it directly with the foreign government, progress or lack of progress is not necessarily shared to the best of my knowledge, other than with you and your attorney. But there's not going to be that sense of government oversight that can be useful in creating pressure. Check with your attorney in the foreign country regarding the best strategy for you and your case. Now, how do you find an attorney in a foreign country? The US Embassy in the country your child was abducted to may have a list of lawyers. However, take note of the disclaimer they place right on the top. For example, the one in Japan says, the Department of State assumes no responsibility or liability for the professional ability or reputation of or the quality of services provided by the entities or individuals whose names appear on the following list. Inclusion in the list is no way an endorsement by the Department of State or the US government, Names are listed alphabetically and in order in which they appear and has no other significance. The information on the list is provided directly by local service providers. The department is not in a position to vouch for such information. So it's just a list. It's a starting point. Not much different than making a Google search, but it might help get you started. One caution with this is I have seen some bad actors, bad attorneys that aren't going to represent your interests well on these types of lists. That's why they have this disclaimer. So, when possible, ask parents that have actually hired lawyers in that country. That's not a guarantee of success either, but it's going to give you another viewpoint and some direct insight. The facts in their cases might be different than yours. But again, it can be useful insight when you're making this decision. You might want to put information on your case online or on a website or on social media. You might also not want to do that. Consider what best serves your strategy and end goal. We live in a time where people share a lot of personal information online. There can be real risks with that. If you go the public route, as I chose to do with my personal case, understand that you open yourself up to people making assumptions without knowing the facts. This can be in support or condemnation. If you post a phone number, make it a separate one from your personal cell phone number or your home number if you can. Same with an email address. Avoid negative comments about the abducting parent. Find another place to release that kind of frustration in a private setting. It's understandable. I would really strongly suggest you don't put that information online. Doing it publicly can be used against you in some foreign courts. Some readers may start to judge you as a bad person who's full of anger and should have had the child taken from them. And it could also feed into a common abductor strategy of portraying you as an angry and dangerous person as part of an effort to alienate your child from you. If you have any sort of direct communication with the abducting parent, see if you can find a way to communicate without addressing topics that might agitate them. If they get angry, can you de-escalate the situation? I know it's not going to be easy, but if it's possible, it may open up channels of communication over time. Each case is going to be different. You know that other person best. But see if there's a way to develop communication that can lead toward your end goal. Okay, let's talk about prevention, because not everyone is going to be dealing with an active abduction case, but some people may be in a situation where they are fearful that their child or children may be abducted. And sometimes this is really hard to imagine, that the person that you may love and had a child with might abduct. Here are the criteria in the state of California, and what they use in their Form FL 341B, Child Abduction Prevention Order. It's a checklist, but it's got some good criteria. Has the other parent violated or threatened to violate a custody or parenting time order in the past? They don't have strong ties to the state. For international cases, you consider if they don't have strong ties to the United States. Have they done things that will make it easier to take the children away without permission, such as quit a job, closed a bank account, sold or gotten rid of assets, applied for a passport, birth certificate, or school or medical records, sold their home, ended a lease, and destroyed or hidden documents? Do they have a history of domestic violence, child abuse, and not cooperating with you on the parenting of the child? Do they have a criminal record? Do they have family or emotional ties to another county, state, or in our situation, foreign country. If you believe your child is at risk, I'd recommend you open a prevention case with the Office of Children's Issues at the U.S. Department of State and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I'd also recommend you seek to enter your child into the federal Prevent Abduction program. This program became law federally in 2014. It requires a valid, enforceable U.S. court order indicating the child is prohibited from being removed from the U.S. And you're going to provide that order to the Office of Children's Issues, who will submit it to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Now, I'll be honest with you, not all family law attorneys and judges are aware of the program. The link to it is on our resources page on our website. If you decide to pursue a court order, you may be faced with the challenge of convincing the court that the risks of travel to another country are severe, that could result in your child not being returned. There's a false and superficial understanding of the Hague Abduction Convention, as it is assumed that it's a solid remedy to return a child. If you and your attorney need assistance, please feel free to contact us. I've testified as an expert witness in the states of California and Florida. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has been known to provide affidavits on risks to certain countries. There are also attorneys around the country that offer services as expert witnesses too. If your child is at risk, seek professional counsel to do what you can to prevent their abduction.
Sadly, too many know the pain and trauma associated with parental and grandparent alienation. Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, will present an important international virtual conference on October 13th through the 15th, 2023. Alienation, the Truth Regarding the Trauma and Abuse, will feature world-renowned experts in the field of alienation. You'll join conference event coordinator Elaine Cobb and moderator Dr. Colleen Murray as they introduce you to keynote speaker Dr. Edward Kruk. Plus, you'll hear important presentations from Dr. Joshua Coleman, Lisa Rothfuss, Dr. Mary Alvarez, Dr. Colleen Murray, Bill Eddy, Dr. Noel Hunter, Dr. Sue Kornbluth, Dr. William Burnett, Megan Hunter, and Jordan Traeger. Join the many attendees already securing their spot for the conference, Alienation, the Truth Regarding the Trauma and Abuse. Visit familyaccess.info for all the details. This special conference is being hosted by Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, Steel Partners Foundation, and PA is CA. Parental alienation is child abuse.
Next week on Families Divided TV, retired Israeli judge Philip Marcus will present on child psychological maltreatment and neglect, including parental alienation prevention, early identification, and immediate intervention in schools.